This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. We have a lot of people pouring in, and we'll just give it about a minute or so, and then we'll get started.
Sounds good.
Erica, who's kicking things off?
I will be.
Great.
Glad you're here, Justina.
Hi, nice to meet you. I love your background. That is beautiful.
That's Morgan Hill. Got to
Oh,
come
it's
down
winery.
and visit Morgan Hill. All our wineries, yes.
I'd love to, like right now.
Let's do it. Yeah, like right now.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started as people are pouring in. Ready? Here we go. Welcome to the League of California Cities Latino Caucus webinar. It's conducted by the Legislative Committee of our Latino Caucus, and you are here for the Lobbying 101 for City Leaders. My name's Erica Arriaga. I am the Executive Director for the Latino Caucus. Thank you all for joining us today. I would like to introduce and welcome our special guest, Assemblymember Robert Rivas from the 30th Assembly District. Assemblymember Rivas is not only the Vice Chair of the Legislative Latino Caucus, he is also the Chair of the Agricultural Committee. He also authored and championed several measures that the Latino Caucus had the privilege of supporting last year, including the first in the nation COVID-19 farm worker relief package. Welcome, Assembly Member, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Erica, and it's always great to see you. And just want to say thank you for the opportunity to say a few words this morning. And I certainly want to welcome everybody. As Erica mentioned, my name is Robert Rivas, and I represent the 30th Assembly District, which it covers a large agricultural area. It's the Salinas Valley, the Pajaro Valley, and it's the region of California. It is considered the Central Coast. And as Erica mentioned, I serve as chair of the Assembly Agriculture Committee and as vice chair of the California Latino Legislative Caucus. And in those roles, I work on a wide array of policy areas, from housing to climate change to labor issues, and certainly much, much more. And I have this incredible opportunity to work with so many great colleagues who come from different backgrounds, who come from different life experiences and some professional experiences. But certainly my primary my concern in my short time in the legislature, this is the start of my fourth year, my second term. But my main my concern has always been about the delivery of public services to the nearly 40 million residents who call California home. And so certainly we must work to ensure that that our state, that our classrooms, our healthcare centers, and our infrastructure are the very best in the world. And certainly I'm sure, like all of you, we want our state to deliver these services in all of these areas in the most efficient way, with the best possible outcomes. And that's not asking so much, because after all, this is California, and we don't shut the door of opportunity to anyone. Our state has always been a place where if you work hard, you can build a much brighter future for yourself and for your family. And to keep that upward mobility available to everyone, it's important that we work together as council members, as county supervisors, as state, as members of the state assembly or state senate. We need to work together to solve problems and deliver results. And I know we're here this morning. I've been asked to talk about lobbying, but really it's about some collaboration. How we can solve problems and do so together. The more we know about what your needs are, especially at the local level, the needs of your residents, your constituents, the more prepared we will be here in Sacramento to ensure that we're working to accomplish and meet those issues that are occurring at the local level, and ultimately to solve problems. You know, everyone cares about something and wants their community to be the best it can be, whether it be some better roads, some playground equipment, some green spaces for their communities, better housing for seniors, for farm workers, for our essential workforce, and it's all up in an effort to accomplish that. It's up to all of us to share those ideas and to come up with some solutions. You know, that requires regular some communication about what is happening in your region, in your communities, your cities, your counties. What are the critical issues you are all facing, and what solutions you need assistance with? It's very important to be direct. Serving at the local level, you certainly are the eyes and ears of every member of the state legislature here in California, and you're the voice of your community. And the language spoken here in Sacramento is data-driven information regarding your neighbor's needs. And so I can't stress enough how important it is that we as state legislators, that we hear from all of you, and we hear from all of you at the local level regularly. Your experience and your collective experience as an association, your knowledge is absolutely critical to empowering your community. And I myself, I served 8 years at the local level as a county supervisor, and I understand where you're all coming from, and I want to work with you. You have 120 members of the legislature here that want to work with you to build a closer relationship, so that at the end of the day, we can solve problems that impact all of your constituents, that impact our entire state. And so with that, I would like to thank you all once again for the opportunity to be here this morning. Certainly appreciate all the work you do, and never hesitate to reach out to our office. I see Minnie on the call, who's Chief of Staff to Blanca Rubio. Call Blanca's office. We are here to serve you. We're here to work with you, and certainly do everything we can to help you. So with that, hope you guys have a great workshop. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Assembly Member. Now, I would like to introduce our premier sponsor for today's event. This is Justina Garcia. She is Principal Manager and Policy Engagement Representative for Southern California Edison. Welcome, Justina.
Thank you so much, Erica, and thanks to everyone. Good morning. I'm very happy to be with everyone today for this webinar. As Erica said, I'm Justina Garcia. I'm a Principal Manager of Policy Engagement in the Local Public Affairs Organization for Southern California Edison. So on behalf of SCE, let me first say that we are proud to partner with the League to sponsor today's program on what I'm sure we all agree is a very important topic of effective lobbying. You may be familiar with SCE. We serve approximately 15 million people in a 50,000 square mile area of Central, Coastal, and Southern California. That means we serve everything in the South from Orange and Riverside counties up through Mono County, east of the Sierra Nevada. So it's very likely that we are your electric utility provider, or that of your friends and family who live in Southern California. I love that I'm able to provide or work somewhere that provides this critical service to friends and family people I know. It's very important. And in my role, I lead a policy engagement team that's focused on advocacy engagement and on issues that affect our customers and our communities of color, such as an equitable clean energy transition. As we all know, representation is so very important for the diverse communities that we all live in and we represent. And I, for one, I'm personally proud to be a Latina and a leader at a company where Hispanics make up 26% of leaders and 35% of the workforce. And I know that at Edison, we share many of your same values and priorities. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are greatly important to us. And I know that this caucus advocates for diversity of local elected officials and for the well-being of the Latino community in general, very important to us. I'm proud to say our parent company, Edison International, is often recognized as one of the most diverse companies in the United States. Starting at the top with our CEO, Pedro Pizarro, our company is diverse in many ways, from the percentage of women in senior operating roles to the diversity of our board, and then just across our employee base. And this is so very important in ensuring that a wide variety of voices are being heard in our work and the way we represent the communities that we serve and the policies that we advocate for. And that's why today's topic will focus on. So Lobbying 101 is about equity and how the voice of local government and entities can be enhanced in regional, state, and federal decision-making. So today's webinar is going to help us all learn how to work within the legislative process to advocate effectively. So let me just say, thank you for the opportunity to kick things off today. I too am looking forward to hearing and learning from today's speakers myself. So without further ado, let me just hand things over so that we can get started, Erica. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Before I introduce our moderator, I would like to ask that when we hear from each one of our panelists, that attendees would put their questions into the Q&A box. All questions will be answered at the end of the presentations. All handouts and information will be made available to attendees after the event. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator, City of Morgan Hill Council Member Yvonne Martinez Beltran. She is also our Latino Caucus Board Member and Legislative Committee Chair. Thank you for leading us in this important discussion and for understanding how important it is to encourage and empower our members to become better advocates. Council Member?
Thank you, Erica. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that all of you are here. Justina, thank you for seeing the value and helping us make this happen. Nick and Minnie, fantastic. The Latino Caucus Legislative Committee's prioritized advocacy as one of our educational webinars because as a council member myself, I remember when I first got elected and being very new, they were one of the first groups that I looked for when I came to the Cal Cities. I was eager to help. I was eager to learn and make change in policy and advocate for my community and to promote the policies that I thought were going to help them on their behalf from what I was hearing. And you have to learn how to do that. And so as a member of Cal Cities, we have a qualified advocate team that's advocating for us on all the statewide issues, on our local issues, on our behalf. And it also is important to us at the Latino Caucus that our members, they understand and feel comfortable participating in the policymaking process. As you'll hear today, timing is a critical factor in advocacy, as well as building those relationships. And we hear that time and time again, build the relationships, know when to do it, but really getting and understanding the nuts and bolts of that is something different. So as we approach the legislative deadline for bill introduction this Friday, and we're all going to start hearing about the new legislation, which if it's passed into law will affect us, our city leaders, for years to come. We want to prepare you to be able to be champions for your cities and for issues that are important. Whether you're very experienced in the political process or you're new to lobbying, we hope that this program will inform you, empower you, maybe help you think about something differently, that you can take action on the issues that are of most importance to you. So first we have our speakers, Minnie Santillan. For more than 2 decades, Minnie Santillan has been a top advisor to many of California's most powerful lawmakers. She's currently Chief of Staff to Los Angeles Assemblywoman Blanca Rubio. Ms. Santillan owns her own political and policy consulting firms, Santillan Devlin, LLC, and Santillan Strategies, where she specializes in electing candidates to office and helps reshape local policies. Santillan has served more than a handful of members of the Senate and Assembly throughout the years, including a Speaker of the State Assembly, as well as the entire California Latino Legislative Caucus. She's left her imprint on countless pieces of legislation, including a water bond that helped secure a sustainable future for water, a law protecting low-income families, access to electricity, and many others. Outside the Capitol, she has worked on California Assembly Senate and congressional campaigns for more than 20 years, never losing a race. Good person to know. In Sacramento, she volunteers with Hispanas Organized for Political Equity or HOPE. Ms. Santillan was raised in California's Central Valley in a large, loving family and is one of 12 children. And it's no wonder where she gets her resilience. Nick Romo is our other panelist, and Nick currently serves as Revenue and Taxation Representative for League of California Cities. Prior to this position, he served as a policy consultant to California State Senator Connie M. Leva, where he primarily focused on state environmental, education, and housing policies. He got his start interning for current mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, and former mayor Antonio Villagarroso. And Mr. Romo was born and raised in Northeast Los Angeles. From a family of public school teachers, he learned the value of public service and education. Thank them for us, Nick. He strongly believes in expanding access, equity, and empathy across many sectors, and he is here to share his expertise with us. So with that, I'd like to welcome both of our phenomenal panelists, and let's get started. Minnie, show us the way.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction. And I will say, not only as a former chief consultant to the California Latino Legislative Caucus, but also as an immigrant child, I've always tried to make sure to give back to my community through giving volunteer time to efforts like these, whether it's educating or helping play a role in helping local electeds maneuver through the process, or it's once we get women on board, which we need to have more women on board in the state of California. Empowering them. And so that's why in my narrative, since I entered the public sector 23 years ago, I always remind people when they come lobby me in Sacramento, I had a job before I came to the legislature. I was a social worker with the county, and so I do understand a lot of the heavy lifting that the county departments do. And then I also worked in the private sector for 3 years, marketing and contracting for a medical group in the Central Valley, which is actually where I cut my teeth in producing TV ads and print and radio. And eventually all those experiences merged into a pathway in policy and in politics. And so I have been very lucky to have the support of a lot of people as I've engaged both behind and in front of the scenes, because I've been lobbied for 23 years, but I also have had to go to Washington, D.C. and lobby myself through organizations like APAC, which I'm very involved with. And I am also on the board of a national housing nonprofit. And so I get to wear multiple roles, and sometimes people get to come lobby me and the assembly member that I work for. And also, may I add that Assembly Member Rubio is an immigrant child, just like myself. Her and her sister, Senator Rubio, are the first pair of sisters to ever sit in the legislature. And there comes a lot of responsibility with that. So there are some slides that Nick put up on I don't know if we're able to share them. That'll help you guide folks through the process. And I feel like a lot of you have already may have a somewhat of a relationship with the elected officials in your area, whether it's local or state or federal. But I guess the biggest question I have for folks is of your elected officials, when you're looking at state officials and federal officials, how many of you have their cell phone number? Or are in a position where you feel like if a bill comes to your attention, maybe you picked up the paper, and as you said, Friday is bill introduction deadline. And so we're seeing a lot of bills roll out right now. If you pick up your local paper and you see in your paper that there's a bill that might impact your community, do you have the comfort level to text your assembly member or your senator? Or, what is the way that you choose to communicate, any concerns or any support that you might have for a policy? I think that as elected officials, you always kind of have to start there and be able to answer that question. And that question might be different depending on how long you've been in office or not. If you just got to office, I think some of the nuts and bolts, and this goes both ways, not just for local elected officials, but I've worked in the state assembly and the Senate for 23 years. And after every election cycle, we always update our local electeds list so that we know, who's currently in office, what the address is. We try to get information. And then if the office is running appropriately, then if you were a newly elected official, you probably received a congrats letter from your assembly member. And I know it's really busy because you work so hard to get into local office. And then you get there and it's like you want to take a deep breath, but you only have half a second to do it, because then you're going to have city staff coming at you and your own family that hasn't seen you for months probably come at you. And so you have to prioritize and try and balance those things. And so I think that somewhere on your list of things to do when you do get elected to office, at top of that priority should be to establish relationships with your state elected officials and with your federal elected officials. And if you haven't received a coffee invite from your assembly member, don't be shy. Put in an email request. If you're working towards having the relationship of being able to communicate with them, then put a foot out. Put a hand out and start to initiate a process of getting to know them. And so and there's a lot of different roles in the legislature. For local elected officials, you should definitely know who the district director is of the assembly member that represents your area. And then besides the district director, you should, it's helpful to know the chief of staff as well. And then besides those two, even better would be the scheduler. Again, a lot of scheduling requests come across the desk in our office. And for myself, I try and gauge what relationships the assembly member has or she doesn't have or needs to work. And when we see a request, and especially if it's a request from a local elected official, it's going to be flagged as important, and trying to get, make that connection. Because again, not only is that connection important for you, it's equally as important for a legislator, because sometimes the California League of Cities might be coming to my office to lobby me on one of their priorities or something they don't like. And one of the questions is that my member's going to have as soon as I say, Nick from the Latino League of Cities came to talk to me about this bill. The member will look up and say, have we heard from anyone in our district? Mm-hmm. So it's good that you guys have, that the league has the League of Cities, the Latino Caucus League of Cities, but the primary question from the member is, did my local elected official let me know themselves? Because there's a difference between, for example, getting a floor alert, that we get thousands of those, getting a phone call, getting a text. That reach out is really important. And there's been times, for example, that we're briefing her on bills that are on the floor for a vote. And it might say that the League of Cities opposed it, but, she'll say, well, who came to talk to us? And if we say no one, then, that plays a role in where they might head, in what direction. There are other times, though, however, where the member will say, did we get a floor alert? Did we get phone calls? Did someone stop by the office? And so every one of those touches is important. But I would say one of the most important touches from a local elected official to an assembly member is the ability to sometimes just send a text. Mm-hmm. Again, you're all very busy people, sorry, elected officials, but if you've worked on a relationship where you have their number, or you have my number, or you have the district director's number, and it's a simple text of saying, hey, the league submitted a letter of opposition. This is important to me and to my city, and I just want to make sure you know that. That goes a long way. Any questions so far?
Any questions, Erica?
No, not just yet. But I did ask everyone to give their questions at the end.
Yeah.
And Yeah, yeah. So I know you're a wealth of knowledge. I know you're going to be the first one that everyone's going to be asking questions from.
So there's a couple of things that I do want to talk on, aside from like the importance of building the relationship and getting to a point of communication with the office is also, and again, Nick did a really good job in the handouts. And one of the handouts, you'll see the legislative calendar. And I think most people in government live by some sort of calendar. And so the legislature isn't different from that. The legislature works around this calendar. Where it says timing is everything. I was giving someone an example recently of the assembly member that I work for. You know, for example, she's engaged and she's trying to get married this year. And so, you know, we've encouraged her fiance to work with the scheduler on trying to set the wedding date. And just a few weeks ago, I was talking to her fiance and I asked him, you know, just like, oh, you know, did you set a date yet? And he said to me, well, I thought I had a date, but then I talked to Blanca about it. And she said, she just looked at me and said it wouldn't work. And I asked him, you know, well, out of curiosity, like when was the date? And he happened to say in June. And I immediately knew June is a deadline for bills to either like die or move out of the assembly. And Assemblymember Rubio is the leader of the moderate Democrats in Sacramento. And so as her role as a leader of moderate Democrats, which tend to be a little bit more socially progressive, but fiscally conservative, she plays a lead role in stopping bad policy. And so that week, if she were to take that week off, there would be a lot of disappointed people, not just legislators that look at her direction for how to position themselves on this policy, but also, you know, from interested stakeholders in these discussions. And so, you know, I smiled at Rob and I said, and I explained to him why that wasn't good timing for her. And then again, kind of suggested that he work with the scheduler. I said, you know, Rob, if you call her a scheduler and you give her a month, she'll find the day that works for you. So legislators live by the calendar. My own legislator is not scheduling her own wedding. Our scheduler is going to try and help and aid in those efforts. And so being able to get a member's attention prior to a deadline is also really important. So sometimes bills are amended through the process, and it might be that the bill wasn't on your radar at the beginning of the introduction, but then they took some amendments along the policy process and then it became a problem. As soon as you know it's a problem, let them know, because again, if you're waiting till through a floor deadline and you're sending them a text or trying to communicate, you're competing with a lot of people for that space. And so when you get ahead as early as you can, you know, that stays fresher in their mind as opposed to when they might be receiving 70 to 80 texts on different bills. So timing is important. The legislative calendar is important. And I think another thing that is important is identify which community groups you want to be engaged with in your district, in your city, and get involved with them, because those community groups, it's, you know, under COVID, it's been a little bit different, but prior to COVID and hopefully after we're through COVID, as a staffer, it's always been interesting because there's certain times of the year where we know folks are coming. And so normally this time of the year, I would expect to see all of you guys in Sacramento walking through the halls or getting an invite from Erica from the League of Cities. I miss the dinners that you guys have where you get that one-on-one interaction. All those community groups present opportunities for you to pick what areas are most important to you. And you all have that in your districts, whether it's housing or homelessness or transportation. You know, make sure that you're actively involved with your local COG group. And then when they're coming up to lobby to Sacramento, you're taking advantage of that. Building the relationships with legislators is good in a number of ways, because not only do you you know, have more of a pipeline to them, but they're also good connectors for all of you. When, let's just say, the city has hit a wall, they're dealing on a transportation issue and they're not getting anywhere with Caltrans. You know, that's when you could tap your legislator and say, hey, you know, we're having this issue locally, and Caltrans is, the district director is just not being as helpful as we think he should be. Can you make a connection? And so they are connectors to other state agencies, to other state departments, and more, I think, than willing to do that. You'd be surprised how many times someone might assume that someone came to us and lobbied us on something, and they just didn't. You'd be surprised how often we're having these floor discussions about these bills, and the assembly member looks at us and says, "Who called?" And we're like, "No one." Did someone send an email? Because we do have systems to track the calls, to track the emails, what's coming from the district, what's not. And most legislators, that's how they feel the pulse of their district. Now, as elected officials, you guys have, you have your finger on that pulse a lot more closely. And so that's why that weigh-in, when we do have to weigh in from a local council member, and we say, well, council member so-and-so called on this housing bill, and they're really opposed to it. And so the legislator might call the council member at the time, or might send the council member a text, and then, that weighs in on their decision. So working with community groups, looking at the calendar, communications are all very helpful in aiding you and giving you the ability to serve your communities better. A lot of times it might be putting in a request for a letter of support. We receive a lot of district letter of support requests, whether it's the Safe Home program or the Safe Routes to Schools or whatever that is. Again, having that relationship, understanding what you need to give the legislative office is very helpful, and being able to bring some of those state funding programs to your cities.
Wow. Thank you, Minnie. That was great. Really great. So now we'll move to Nick, if you're ready and prepared to go, Nick. But thank you for those words, Minnie. I feel like, that it's hot off the press, and you're seeing this every day, as you said. And so it's good reminders to us about how to make sure that we are being seen and the best ways to be heard, and to also be on top of the issues that are coming our way, so we can make those connections right away.
Actually, that saying, the squeaky wheel,
yeah,
gets the oil, and it's certainly true in the legislature. I know most of the elected officials that I know from Assemblymember Rubio's district, and I've been her chief for 3 years now, are the elected officials that send me emails, that call me, and I go to the district quite a bit. It's those folks that I remember right off the top of my head. So
no, really great tips. I feel like these aren't the ones that you constantly hear. There were some good nuggets there. So, okay. Nick, take it away.
And Nick, before you get started, can you see the slide okay? And you just let me know when you're ready to go to the next one.
Oh, we're good. Eric, if you can go to full screen in the bottom right, just so rest of folks can see it fully. Okay, target. Go to the next slide, please. Well, first of all, I'll just say thank you for having me here. It's an honor for me to be amongst these tremendous Latino leaders in our space, and I certainly again I appreciate the welcome. For this slide deck, hope it can be a resource for all of you. We're going to speed through a couple of slides, but just know we'll provide them all to you. Be good sort of glossary for you to look back on. But we wanted to make sure that you have all the information that we were referring to. I think Minnie's already done a tremendous job walking through a significant amount of it. And what I wanted to add for you are some tools for you to think about utilizing in your own lobbying of your legislators and advancing your specific missions. Of course, you have the League of California Cities, and I'll touch on that. We are focused on statewide issues of importance to all cities, and we know that you also have things that you want to work on specifically in your region and for your constituents, and we want to make sure you are equipped to do that. Okay, so next slide. Next slide. I wanted to start off. I know Hope was mentioned, that I recently was also honored to be a of a panel with Latinas Lead, is another organization supporting new and ongoing Latina leaders. And one of the things what we spelled out was how to come to the space with confidence, and how to lead. And one of the things I love is leading con ganas, leading with inspiration and with passion, and also a strength and affirmation that we are all here, we deserve to be here, and we need to continue on with our mission. So I was just saying it's up front that, you were elected to lead to solve problems. Don't let the legislative process, the complexity of it, scare you away from that, and move you from your mission. Use it, learn it, and towards your own goals. So I appreciate you all being here for that. Okay, next slide. Again, this is a glossary of terms. You want to make sure that we're spelling out all the things we're talking about. There are different types of legislation that can be introduced. They all have different sorts of timelines and different nuances here. The most popular ones are the ABs or the SBs. You'll hear about SB 100, AB 100. This is Assembly bill or Senate bill. These are bills, they get their moniker, their name, by the House that they're introduced in. So Blanca Rubio, Assemblywoman Rubio would introduce an AB Assembly bill. I'm sure she's introducing quite a few this week. You'll see a number of other ones. We have your resolutions, which are similar to your local ordinances that are largely commemorative in nature. Of course, you have our constitutional amendments that the legislature can push forward to go on the ballot. Those pick up the moniker of the SCA, or Senate Constitutional Amendment, or Assembly Constitutional Amendment. Okay, next slide. All right, next slide. Great, I was very thorough with this presentation. Next slide. I wanted you all to have it, and a space like this allows us to talk in between the lines here, but you all also have it as a resource for you. So one of the things that gets quite confusing or hard to discern is where a bill is currently. Where does it start? Where does it end? What's its lifespan? So within a legislative session, which is considered 2 years, so it starts in January of 1 year, and ends in December of 2 years later, a whole session, which means a particular piece of legislation can live throughout within its own number, which is AB moniker, for 2 years. It has to pass through deadlines along the way. Sometimes it never makes it out of its own house, which is, say, for example, an AB has not made it out of the assembly in time in the first year, which gives it that special name of a 2-year bill, which means that it does have a fighting chance to make it. It just has to do in a much more expedited process in the second year. So you'll see this time around, we're in the second year of a session, which will end at the end of this year. We have bills that are 2-year bills. That means they were introduced likely this time last year, and they're still moving forward, trying to make it to the mountaintop there. Next slide. Next slide. As we all know, our state legislature is made up of 120 members. There's 40 in the state Senate and 80 in the state assembly, and many enjoys the large house, the large assembly house there. This is one of the, I point this out because just so you know, you all have 2 or sometimes more assembly members and senators in your region. And they're all tasked with supporting your region. So getting to know that, I think many hammered that home quite well. Next slide. One aspect of getting elected to the Assembly and Senate is that you're actually part of a significant amount of policy committees, but budget committees, and these become the places where you all need to direct your advocacy. So a piece of legislation gets introduced and actually gets sent to a particular policy committee. So whether that's an energy bill, likely gets sent to the Assembly Energy Committee, or many times a city-related measure will get sent to the Assembly Local Government Committee or the Senate Governance Committee. Each of those committees has consultants, chief consultants, associate consultants. They also have a chair, chaired by Assembly member or senator. These become the arenas that we are working throughout the year. So we'll send out action alerts, or you need to write a letter, knowing, and many mentioned this, the timing is everything. Where is the bill? Where is the issue? Who do we need to talk to? A lot of times we'll hear we have to talk to everybody, all 120 members. And sometimes that's appropriate. Sometimes we just have to talk to the 13 and the chair of that committee. And so knowing where we are and how do we direct our energy in the most efficient way is always important. Next slide. The Appropriations Committee is something that I get a lot of questions about. A bill that has any sort of fiscal impact of more than $50,000 in a given year gets sent to the Appropriations Committee. The committee has to review the impact on state resources, on local resources, our ability to pay for the new idea or new program. Many times a measure will go to this committee and then not make it out, right? This is a point in which the legislature has an opportunity to decide which sorts of legislation they want to move forward, that they're willing to go to bat for in the budget process. Nothing is free, right? And so a number of these bills that do cost a significant amount of money, even though they're great policy, may not ever make it to the floor vote or for any further discussion until the next session. And I want to get into how to help you think about each piece of legislation and how you can continue to advocate that something should pass out of the Appropriations Committee or out of the Policy Committee. Okay, we've seen this before. It's, you go from an idea to law, and the art of this is figuring out how to get it from point A to B here. There are different ways to connect, and so I'll go to the next slide. All right. So this goes back to leading con ganas and not letting this kind of steer you off path. This is the sort of typical life cycle of a piece of legislation. That A to B, from the amazing idea you have sitting right now on Zoom with us, to getting the Governor Newsom to sign that piece of paper that makes something law, or signs that budget that brings significant resources to your community. This tiny, you can't see it here, but the purpose is to demonstrate that there is a long process, long path that a bill does have to take, and it takes energy and commitment and focus on each level. This is mainly made up of policy committees and budget committees along the way that have to review your piece of legislation. And you notice that it looks identical both for the top and bottom. That's because we have what's known as a bicameral legislature, 2 houses. The piece of legislation needs to go through both houses and be reviewed before it gets to the governor. So I will share, you're going to get a copy of all these slides. It'll be much easier to read and be able to examine even further with links and everything. Absolutely.
Thanks, Nick.
Next slide. Yeah, so I say this and then I say, well, big caution sign, subject to change. And this is because bills can move kind of like chess. Bills can move forward or backwards. Bills can stall for policy reasons, political reasons, appropriate fiscal reasons. They can, the legislature, if it needs to act urgently, or if you've convinced them to act urgently, can move and expedite this process along the way. So we sort of know the rules and then learn how to be the art of the rules and how we navigate through this. And as part of the questions later I want to provide to you is this something that's urgent? How is this important today? Does it need to be expedited? Does it need special attention? And it helps you along the way, make sure that you're getting what you want to move forward. Okay, next slide. I won't belabor this slide too much. This is a typical life cycle of a bill. It's introduced, it goes through the policy committees. And in this case, it actually got presented to the governor and signed. So I think the senator had a good day with this bill. Next slide. And we'll take questions on this. And I know we started somewhat with this slide. It's that timing is everything. I want to dig a little deeper. Where we are now in February 2022, it was mentioned that on Friday is a bill introduction deadline. That's the deadline for senators and assembly members to physically cross bills across the respective desks so that it can be considered as a piece of legislation for this year. We really moved through the spring and the early summer, reviewing through all the policy committees these measures and the fiscal impacts of those measures, along with the budget process. And I know many of you locally are going through your budget process now, and that should be done by June 30th for the most part. And for timing, the summer months get a little quiet, and then August they are full steam ahead, and early September full steam ahead. The legislature is fully busy trying to get these measures to the governor. And then we move to the fall and winter, which are a little quieter, relatively speaking. And that's a time for new ideas and new perspectives and new things to bring forward. So we move through in and out of the legislative cycle and take different tacks throughout the way. Next slide. I wanted to put this in here so you get a sense of the construction of any type of bill. Many times I get questions about just the top half of a measure. Really, that is what we consider the legislative digest. It is just a summary that's written by the legislature's attorneys, known as the Legislative Council. Provides a quick snapshot of what they believe the measure is doing to change the law and its impacts on either an entity like yourself, the city, or community. We have to dig deeper. Usually the digest gives us kind of an appetizer, an antipasti, so to speak, of what's in the measure. And then the next part is usually the actual meat of the measure, and that's where we get the details, and we know what lies within the details is that devilish, the devilish aspect of this. Okay, next slide. A committee analysis. This is something that's quite overlooked by folks who are not ingrained in this process. The committee analysis is written by a number of our committee analysts, our principal consultants in each committee. So that would be energy committee or local government committee. How they characterize the measure. The committee analysis gives them an opportunity to talk about the negative aspects or positive aspects, or more importantly, what you all think about a piece of legislation. Getting inside this committee analysis is critically important. Getting your city or yourself to be listed as an opponent or supporter of a piece of legislation, influencing the committee consultant to sort of detail your perspective or your concerns, your support in the analysis is important, because then that gets publicized to all members of the legislature and all members of the public, including those you're working with on the advocacy side. So in order to get on the analysis, actually, next slide is perfect, yeah. In order to get on the analysis, you must submit a letter to the committee, and now it's online, so that's a good thing. No longer need to physically deliver the letter. We provide many times the advocacy for Cal City, who are providing you a sample letter. Really, we're talking about providing you a space to speak directly to your legislators about the issues that are impacting your city, whether it be a specific bill or a larger issue like COVID-19. For a specific bill, we'll provide you the details of the measure and give you space to talk about how SB 105, for example, is impacting the city of Morgan Hill or the city of Long Beach. How does that work? And that speaks to what Minnie's talking about, being able to pick up the phone or text your legislator, or text Minnie or her legislative director or aides, but also submitting formally your comments and getting that recognized in a more formal sense is very important. Next slide. Okay. This is what I'll stop after these slides and I want to take your questions. One of the things that I've learned in talking with folks like Minnie, her counterparts, and other chiefs of staff, legislative directors, is really whether we're bringing a proposal, and I know Erica wanted me to focus on helping you as advocates for yourself, for your city, advocates issues that you care about. These are the questions that you're going to run into. So you have a great idea no doubt, you're going to bring it to your local legislator. You'll likely start with their legislative aide or their legislative director. If you're lucky, you'll get to have many in the room with you to talk to you about that. We go through the flowery language that this is what we want to work on. Say you want to create a new statewide park bond to bring new playgrounds and baseball fields and basketball courts to your cities. Okay, that's an amazing idea. I think many of us will agree that we need those things. But now what? What are the details? What is the purpose and why is it needed? We likely start there, and we do a pretty good job of doing that. And then we got to get into the details. How will we pay for what you want? What are the consequences of not doing this bill? And one of the things that we really need to address, I appreciate the legislature and many of you focused on, and certainly I'm focused on, is how does this address equity gaps in our communities? Specifically, what is the data that we have that leads us to believe and conclude that new parks or new basketball courts, not just in your city, but specifically in areas within your city, how will that address sort of issues within your community, whether that be gang violence or truancy or simply teenagers hanging out at the mall too much and not doing anything productive. And another aspect of this, so if you're talking with me and I need to go to the legislature, is talking about the actual implementation aspects. What is needed? What are the interactions with labor? What are the costs that are created with needing for supplies and long-term management and long-term operations? So as much as you can fill this out and think about all these aspects, you're going to be successful, because at every turn, at every question, concern, and I think one of the things I've learned in my time with legislature is it's sort of easy to shoot down ideas at times when we don't have answers or not enough answers for the questions that we have regarding a bill idea. And things get easily dismissed at times or pushed away or put to the side until we have more answers. And so to the extent that you're providing, working with your city staff, working with myself, Cal City, my colleagues, engaging with fellow city council members, getting a sense of how do we build out a program, how do we build out a new law, I think it's going to make you much more successful. Next slide.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. Have you wrapped that up then?
No, I think
I think I've got a few more, but I figure I'd stop.
No.
Well, then we can get to some of the tips.
Go for it.
Can we go back one slide?
sure. This one?
Okay, we'll go. Okay, next slide then.
Next forward side?
Next slide. All right, I decided I want this slide. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all. We've talked at length about developing relationships. I think you've done a tremendous job of doing that. I wanted to put towards your attention to a couple of details that you can work on locally that I have found to be successful. Again, as your lobbyist in revenue and taxation, I'm looking at statewide issues, and we gather information from several different robust input points from our members. Many of you, though, have local issues and will continue to work on that need specific focus and deserve and demand attention. One of the things that I've found to be really effective is when your city actually has a point person, and whether that be formal as a legislative liaison or a staff member within your office that is going to be that point of contact to have my cell phone number or my ability to call that person to talk to you about the process and the details and the deadlines that are coming up, right? Talk about timing. That has been very effective. And working with your regional public affairs manager, and I'll give you the list of all the folks within your regions. I have 16 amazing colleagues that are living in your regions to help you with all of this. And so I want to make sure that hammer home that to the extent that you can appoint and have points of contact for these sorts of things, whether that be your current legislative aide or someone within your office, is very effective. So there's sort of a constant stream of communication on these sorts of things. A number of cities have, and a number of cities don't have a policy platform that they develop each year. A number of the cities that do have that, they develop it usually around this time of year, what the city wants the state legislature, what the city wants Cal cities to focus on. It is very important to state that out, right? And that gives you, and many times for these cities, you're able to act quickly. Because as many mentioned, things can change on a drop of a dime in the legislature. A new bill can come up today that is really important to you. You need to have the ability to act quickly. We have cities that can take a couple of weeks to get a position out of their council. And that makes sense given your schedule and needing staff time to review. Doing some of this work ahead of time, particularly on the matters that are utmost important to you in your community, is extremely helpful. That means you're able to pick up the phone immediately, write that letter immediately, and get in as quick as possible to Minnie and her colleagues. It was mentioned by Assembly Member Rivas, and I appreciate what he said about data and data-driven decision making. One of the most powerful things we've done, and you all have done, is provide examples and provide longitudinal data about the issues that are happening in community. I'll give you an example of this. In the original CARES Act, most cities in California were left out. Only the largest cities, just a handful of the largest California cities received CARES Act money. We went to work in a number of your cities, I believe, actually 350 of the cities submitted data to us, specifically about the impacts that COVID-19 was having on them in 2020 and early 2021. We secured $500 million just off that data set alone, working with the Department of Finance and letting the legislators know how important this is. We did the same thing with the $8.3 billion American Rescue Plan Act. If you all remember, as you know, we were only one vote. We only had one extra vote to get to American Rescue Plan to be implemented. We had a lot of convincing to do that cities actually needed support. And that data really drove home all the issues. So if you're bringing a parks program bill or a public restroom bill, homelessness bill, having that local data, those examples, specific projects on specific intersections, those are sorts of things that I believe can't be ignored and haven't been ignored and are extremely appreciated by legislative staff, particularly when we talk about budget staff. Budget staff needs the figures to make sure things round out and pencil out. And I'll stop at the next slide, I promise. Next slide. Speaking on that last point is getting a sense of how specific decisions, prospective decisions made by a legislator are going to impact your local budget and your service delivery. So when we talk about, for example, a new paid sick leave or a new mandate to collect or to recycle more, whatever it may be, working with your fiscal officers, your finance directors, whether that be your finance director or your chief accountant, to get a sense of how much you're spending on a particular issue now, and should a particular piece of law change, how much more would you spend or how much less you would spend, right? To get a sense of that, and that gives you that material to bring to your legislators as well, to give them concrete examples of how to respond to a piece of legislation. Many mentioned it, and I remember Rivas mentioned it, is we're stronger together, create coalitions locally. That's really important. This time around, these days, some of the most effective coalitions I'm seeing are city council members with local small business groups, small business associations, folks that are trying to survive through the pandemic, and those discussions about what specifically is needed have led to great investments and saving a number of our small businesses. And I'll stop with this last point is that gets overlooked actually, is getting to know your local press and your ability to influence the stories that get written. Those stories often lead to bill ideas. I know I was combing the San Bernardino news all the time when I would see, council member Diaz said that, water is a problem in the city, or there's no more parks that are open past 6 o'clock, whatever that may be. Those are the sorts of things that then get percolated into bill analyses and potential bills and changes to law. So think about how you're going to influence that part of it. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to take questions and keep going.
Thanks, Nick. That's really fantastic. I've read through the presentation and I'm still taking notes. So you had some really good points, and I hope that everybody's finding this really valuable. I mean, these are the things that we want to bring to you as the Latino Caucus, because we know in order for us to have a real impact, we've got to be ready. We've got to be trained. We need to have those relationships as you're talking about, but also bring, to really bring the data and bring the examples that we need. So this is all fantastic. Erica, I think before, I hand it over, I want to make sure, we've talked about having a follow-up to this. There's so much information in here. I would be interested if people would love to, hear that for the legislative committee, to see something like this again, maybe on the budget, maybe on digging into this a little bit more. But let's take some of the questions. If Erica, if you see some of those that we could bring in.
I am. Let's see, we have what might be considered a critical mass of calls, text, emails, or letters that might cause the legislator to move their position.
Many.
Okay. So that's always an interesting question that and I wanted to add this because you all know how important counting is. After all, it's how you got to public office, right? Because you learn how to count your district and get the majority. And then you get to city council and you have to learn to count a smaller number, right? What the majority is in your council is what becomes most important to push your policy through the city. And it's the same thing with the legislature. When you are passionate about an issue, I also want to add on to what Nick said. You could work your relationship locally with the reporter or the editor to bring something to their attention. Say, hey, look, I've been following the discussions on SB 9, Atkins housing bill, and this is why it doesn't work for our community, and why isn't the paper writing anything about it? And so then that puts that additional pressure on legislators. And in our office, for example, I'm going to bring up SB 9 because it was a tough vote for assembly members, for any elected official in California to take. And Assembly Member Rubio actually did not vote for SB 9, which was authored by Atkins at the time. So she had to have a conversation with the pro tem about why she wasn't supporting her bill. And the reason that she decided not to support the bill is because our office was taking calls from our local elected officials, and we had more local elected officials that reached out against the bill than for the bill. Okay. And so there's not a magic number in the sense that I could say, make sure you have at least 30 calls in, but you know how to count. So let's just say if something's important to your city, like whether it's supporting or not supporting SB 9, and that, let's just say, in your city, you have 7 council members, then you want to make sure at least 4 of those council members reached out to their elected official. That's the majority of the city council. And so then that vote gets weighed a little bit differently than having one person call. But when my assembly member was trying to decide how she should vote on SB 9, she ultimately looked at who her city council members were. And we said, okay, this many members called, but the majority of them were in this situation. So then for her, it was kind of reading her district, right? And understanding that it was going to be a difficult vote for her not to take, right? That she was going to have to do some explaining to leadership. But ultimately, the fallback was, look, I've taken the pulse in my district. My local electeds have weighed in, and they're just not there. And if they're not there, then I'm not there. Those are tough. But again, so whatever that reach out is, if you're looking at it from your city perspective, then engage your colleagues too and say, hey, look, I'm going to reach out. Is it, make sure you do too. So it's going to be the majority of whatever your council number is to really penetrate the pulse of the member when it comes to that vote, specifically if it's a tough vote. Now, if you're very motivated and you want to make sure that you're helping them and aiding them in their vote, then a plus would be to get an editorial or to get a news story in the paper, because then they really could go to leadership and say, man, I had the majority of my council come back to me and the local paper wrote about it. And so, all those pressures, it's lobbying, and it's how important is your issue to you to get what you need, and how can you work with your legislator and at the same time maybe provide them some cover.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I don't necessarily see another question in there, but I will say,
Erica, I saw a question in the queue, and it had a question on companion bills.
Okay.
Why we have them. And so I want to say this: not all good policy is good politics, and not all not all politics is good policy. And so sometimes in the political environment, when we're hitting these deadlines, they're what are called house wars. Okay. And so sometimes you have two companion bills because one legislator may have been more effective in maneuvering the bill to the governor's desk before, these house wars began. Sometimes, a legislative office might be moving a little bit differently, and, their offices are staffed differently. Someone might be out. And so the bill may have not have moved as quick, and then the bill may become a casualty of politics. It has nothing to do with policy. But again, you hedge your bets. And sometimes if you want to make sure, there's more than one opportunity to potentially maneuver the bill through with just one legislator, then in those efforts, you'll see sometimes companion bills put on the table.
Fantastic. And as Nick shared, Cal Cities is excellent at sharing information and getting us to be able to participate in the legislative process on these major bills and the things that affect us statewide. And as Councilmember Beltran was explaining that, for example, our organization has individual pieces of legislation that we follow that maybe don't fall under full state, coverage, and maybe it's Latino based. So that's really why we wanted to bring this to everyone's attention and let you know that, when it comes to these issues that are important to you, that you have a way of being able to advocate for those as well. Every year, the Latino Caucus reviews all of the legislation as well, identifying pieces that are important to us, and we end up doing some advocacy as well. And I'll just throw out some of these questions that some of my board members asked that I hear, and that might be helpful to hear. So I get questions like, what is inactive versus dead? I don't know what that means when I say, okay, we're not going to follow that one anyway, it's dead. So if we could do a little quick Q&A on that, something like inactive versus dead. What does that mean when somebody looks at that on a piece of legislation?
Well, I'll start. I think we might have different perspectives from the outside. An inactive piece of legislation is something that the legislature has put aside and essentially saved it from the needing to meet the deadline. We largely see this on when it meets the Senate or Assembly floor. Those bills need to be taken up in a timely manner. If we put something on inactive file, just move it to the side, give it a little recess, let it sit in the corner for a little while. Something that's dead, that has failed a formal legal deadline, whether that be by January 31st, the measure needs to get out of its own house. If it failed to do that, then it formally has perished through the legislative process. But the reason why I say different take is that no, I don't believe that any idea is formally dead until the gaveling down in the last day of the legislative session.
Perfect.
And I do want to add to what Nick said, because that's very true. sometimes we park vehicles. We try and move policy along as far as we can because there's different rules. If something is really important to someone, we might we have a couple of bills parked on the Senate side, for example, and we know the policy is not going to work, but it's a vehicle just in case. Because remember, there are the rules, but then there are rule waivers. And when you have good relationships and a push from industry and leadership on board, that's when they revive bills. It's a miracle because then, in the rules, you could pull the bill out of the policy committee, you can amend the bill, and then it's going to get re-referred and go through the process again. It really is amazing. Again, in my 23 years, some of the maneuvers, I actually saw the administration weigh in on a bill when I worked for Assembly Member Henry T. Perea. I was his chief of staff. The bill had moved the Senate floor. Okay, so this bill was on its way back to the assembly for its final vote to go to the governor. And just like state agencies, right? The state agency weighed in right when they moved off the Senate floor and said, wait a minute, we have issues. And I'm like thinking, oh my God, what do I need to do? So it turned out in order to pull the bill back, we needed to have the majority of the Senate rules members agreed to pull it back, which meant we couldn't do it without Republican support. Fortunately, the bill was not as controversial. It was a water-related bill, which on that issue, the Republicans are usually with us on. And we were able to get the votes to pull it back and then make the amendments and then take it up for a vote. So nothing is ever really dead.
And we have a question from our moderator, which is great. And I just want to remind everyone, as you hear, because it is a complex process, and oftentimes we'll think, well, if they have a rule that they can do or move, that doesn't seem fair, and this is confusing. Why would I want to, we get nihilistic about it. But really, it is important that these measures, that these opportunities are involved and available to the legislators, because just with COVID-19, you might have had a list of bills that you wanted to move forward, but because this emergency occurred, you needed to pull some bills and have, exactly like Minnie said, that vehicle ready to go to really take some action on some important issues that came up. It was a change in action and you needed to be able to move forward. So a lot of these rules are here to be able to move through the process when needed, not just to switch things up as they would like to. So Yvonne, you have the last question. And then
I just, for everyone who's listening, we heard a lot of good things about what we can do and how we build relationships and how to kind of get the ammunition that you need to really drive some policy. What I want to hear maybe from both of your different perspectives are, what are some of the absolute industry no's? Don't do, things that are looked down upon that can maybe help some of our members as they're trying to make their way in, even to, as to like timing. You talked a lot about timing. So what's a good opportunity in the fall or the spring to connect with your legislators? But is there anything really that, is frowned upon or just not so helpful?
Okay, I'll give a few. Just again, timing is everything. And so some simple do's is don't come 2 days before the deadline, to your assembly member or senator and say, hey, I have a great bill idea, because there's a lot of cooking that needs to be done before someone decides, who they're going to enter the ring with. And, different policies become different types of political lifts for people. And, from a staff perspective, we have to do our homework behind the scenes to give the best reco to our legislator. And so that's really important. And then, like I said, it's really important to develop those relationships ahead of time. So a lot of it just continues to be just like you. They have to balance, their life in Sacramento with their life in the district and their life with their own families. Mm-hmm. And so, so be respectful of their time. And again, that first interaction what you have with someone is someone's first impression. And so, it's the first time that you're asking them for something, do you want it to be kind of last minute? You've never sat down and had coffee, or do you want to be more conscientious of building that relationship so that you can get to a point of communication where it's more effective for you and for them?
Great tips, Minnie. How about you, Nick? What have you seen?
Yeah, I was thinking deeply about this. I know we all know the adage, don't burn a bridge. And what I'd add here is don't burn a bridge over one issue.
Right.
The legislators, especially those who were in city council or local government,
Great
like
point.
I remember Rubio or Rivas, they know, they've been in your shoes, but now they have this special responsibility to look at the state of 40 million people. And having worked for a member, I know how difficult it is for a member to vote, in a different way than the local elected officials. But usually that was just one issue. They deal with 25, 30 different issues in a given week, day. And they may be voting no or against or yes, or however you may feel that's against what your position is. They'll probably need to vote yes on a budget bill that is bringing down millions of dollars for your city or whatever it may be. So I know we know the adage, don't burn a bridge, but don't burn a bridge over one issue. And I know in these times we are concerned about housing and homelessness, and we're battling and debating very vigorously about these sorts of things. There are so many other things as well, though. And so keep those relationships vibrant and not just around one issue. Continue to invite them, even if they voted against your interests. Continue to talk with them. They've got a tremendous responsibility, not to absolve them, but to understand that they are touching many aspects of our lives.
Well, that's fantastic. With that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you both so much for bringing your expertise and really sharing with us, kind of pulling back the curtain a bit. Really appreciated it. And it sounds like this was really valuable for some of the people. I'm reading the comments in here in the chat. And so to those attending, thank you for being here and taking the time. I hope that this gave you some great points. Look for more to come. We've got some more that we're doing. We'll be having another webinar coming up soon, and we will be in communication. Erica, anything you want to add?
No, that's about it. I'm putting our website on in the chat, and we will be sending these slides to everyone who attended today. And my final two tips is, one, be prepared. Do not walk into these people's offices without knowing your stuff, because they're taking time out of their day to meet with you. And two, be nice to the staff. Get to know the schedulers. They're the ones that are going to be scheduling your appointment. So those are my two tips. And thank you everyone for participating. And definitely we will be getting this information to you. And don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Yeah, and I want to say, if people have ideas, we would love to hear them. So I put my number in the chat, but you can find us all on the League of Cities Latino Caucus page. And if you've got ideas of things that you'd like to hear, if there's somewhere in here that you would like to expand on, we would love to do that. So let us know. Okay. Thank you both. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.